Good afternoon, everyone. Simgaget, Sigidamanak, Giwit Wiltsik. My name is Melanie Mark, Minister of Advanced Education, Skills and Training. I'd like to acknowledge we're on the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations peoples here at the Vancouver Cabinet Office. Welcome and thank you to my colleague Shane Simpson, Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, and Marcia Nozick, CEO of Embers, for joining me here today. I'm proud to be here speaking on behalf of people I know and respect, and who are doing their level best to make a difference during this extraordinary time. Residents in the Downtown Eastside are stepping up to make a better place for their neighbours, despite the endless obstacles they seem to face. Peer workers have been in the front lines supporting some of our most vulnerable citizens during this emergency health pandemic. COVID-19 has dramatically impacted our lives and the lives of everyone around us over the past 3 months. This has been a stressful time for everyone, including residents in the Downtown Eastside. Many of us recognize the complex and diverse needs of people in the Downtown Eastside community. Many of these individuals were failed by the residential school system, are immune compromised, and are struggling with mental health and addictions. For many people in the Downtown Eastside, their peers are their only family and source of strength. Their peers are who they turn to get through the day. I want to acknowledge the resilience of these residents and their unwavering generosity to help one another out during both positive and challenging times. One of our government's key priorities is to support people and provide services that they can count on. We also believe strongly in innovation and partnerships. Residents and community organizations in the Downtown Eastside have called on our government to support peers. This call to action is driven by loving and compassionate individuals who know better than anyone how best to support their needs. They are often the unsung heroes of the Downtown Eastside. Today, we are supporting a unique grassroots approach. I'm pleased to announce $200,000 in funding from the Workforce Development Agreement to empower peers in the Downtown Eastside with training and paid work experience to support their neighbours to maintain social distancing, while also sharing important information from Dr. Bonnie Henry and helping peers with access to food, housing, education, sanitation, and health services, to name a few. 40 peers will take part in this initiative, gaining valuable skills and paid work experience. My ministry is doing this by building on existing programming offered by Embers, the Eastside Movement for Business and Economic Renewal Society. Peer workers will be recognized for their leadership and lived experience, and we will continue to support them with the training they need to leverage their knowledge for future job opportunities. Embers will also be gathering community insights to better understand the true lived experiences of people in the Downtown Eastside, to help inform government on other tools that we should be looking at to successfully support vulnerable people to stay safe and build their capacity for training and job readiness. Ultimately, this is the kind of empowerment our government believes in. I want to thank Marcia, CEO of Embers, her entire team, and some of the partners involved, including WISH, Eastside Works, Overdose Prevention Society, Aboriginal Front Door, Raise the Rates, and the Downtown Eastside Women's Centre, for stepping up to lead this project. I also want to thank the federal government for allowing us to be flexible and nimble, to respond quickly to emerging community needs through the Canada-BC Workforce Development Agreement, a file that Minister Simpson and I share together. Because of the strong working relationship between our governments, we are able to deploy resources to focus on community-led supports. As we continue to navigate through Phase 2 of BC's Restart Plan, it is more important than ever for all of us, no matter where we live, to continue to support each other, to reach out to our family and friends, to help our neighbours while continuing to practice safety measures. Let's all keep doing our part to lower transmission rates and keep flattening the curve. I know in my heart better times are ahead for us all. And now I'd like to invite my colleague, Minister Simpson, to share a few remarks. Thank you for being here today. Hawa.
Thank you, Minister Mark. And I want to also acknowledge that we are here on the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and to thank them for the opportunity to live, work, and play here. I particularly want to thank Minister Mark for her leadership on accessing these resources to put this peer program in place. What we know is throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, peer support workers have been on the front lines. They've helped people access resources they need, and they've done that in ways that engage people who they understand and have a close affinity with. As examples, during the last 2 check issue days for checks from my ministry in the Downtown Eastside, peers played a critical role in helping support physical distancing and protecting health and safety of people who are entering banks and government offices. And we get pretty significant crowds around check issue day, as we'll see again tomorrow. But the peers have played a critical role in that initiative. Also, during our recent efforts to house people living in the encampment at Oppenheimer Park in Vancouver, and also at Topaz Park and the Pandora Corridor in Victoria, peers were there. And they were critical to the success that we had in those initiatives. They were able to help campers to express their concerns, their fears, and their needs so that they could be matched with appropriate housing options. They helped campers to pack and move. And we continue to see them support people experiencing homelessness. Peer workers play an essential role in gaining trust with people as they transition to being housed. They provide grassroots feedback to us as government around the steps that we need to take to be successful as we work together to provide supports for those who are homeless and those who are street entrenched. It really is hard to overestimate the value of someone being able to honestly say, I understand what you're going through, I've been where you are. And peers can do that. And they can do it in ways that as government officials, as politicians, we simply can't do. Peers bring a unique perspective and a type of empathy to continuing to work with our vulnerable populations to navigate COVID-19. And what we know is those initiatives are going to be very necessary for some time to come. The challenges of COVID-19, the challenges of the pandemic continue to be in front of us, and they will be in front of us for quite some time. And I know as we work, and as Minister Mark, as the MLA for the Downtown Eastside, and myself and my responsibilities in my ministry, we're looking at what that path forward looks like to ensure that we provide the safety and protections that we can to people living in the Downtown Eastside, people living homeless, people who are vulnerable. And the role that peers play will be essential in helping to guide us and helping to support the work we're doing. By developing skills, the peers also draw on lived experience to support people in overcoming those same hardships. They play a valuable role on the front lines of the fight against poverty and homelessness in British Columbia. This funding is a critical step in the right direction to ensure that we can maintain and improve effective services for those who are living homeless, for those who are living in the Downtown Eastside. It will provide, this funding will provide peers with training and additional tools to emotionally support people, to communicate about available resources, and be a link between vulnerable people and government. I want to express my gratitude to all of the peers for using their experience to lift others up. Without it, we will not be successful. And I want to thank them for their commitment to making their neighbors' lives better. At this point, I want to introduce Marcia Nozick, the CEO of Embers, who are going to help us to administer this program. Over the next 6 months, Embers will be working with the Downtown Eastside Peer Network to make this work. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Ministers, both of you, tremendous support, tremendous description of peers. And, I was just thinking how, in peer work, we take something like a lived experience that sometimes is seen as a barrier or sometimes is seen as something very negative, and we actually turn that into an asset, and we can build on those assets. So, I was thinking about this 10 weeks ago when the reality of this COVID pandemic really hit BC. And the government and Dr. Bonnie Henry said to all of us, if your work is unessential, go home and stay home. And then I thought, well, how do people who are homeless stay at home? And that's the crux of the issue and the problem in the Downtown Eastside. People are living in crowded conditions, in shelters, on the streets, in close quarters with one another, and they're really it's very difficult to distance. And at the same time, the organizations that normally had spaces for people to meet, drop-in centers and places where people came to eat, those organizations closed their doors for the time being. And this worsened the situation for the security and the protection of people in the Downtown Eastside and their ability to be safe. And if there's one lesson that I think that we've all learned from this pandemic, it's that our fates are interconnected and that the health of every person is really literally tied to the health of all of us. And that includes our most vulnerable and most marginalized, and especially the most vulnerable and marginalized who have little ability to protect themselves. So as a result, the Downtown Eastside organizations came together to share resources and to respond to this state of emergency. And a major part of this response has been to reach out and hire the people who live in the neighborhood, people with lived experience who might be homeless themselves, to support others in the neighborhood during this pandemic. And some of the jobs that people have now are helping to keep people socially distanced. They're distributing food, taking food to people living in the SROs. They're cleaning up garbage because, garbage is amassing. Giving out information on COVID. They're monitoring the outside washrooms. And the drug addicts are helping to reach out to other drug addicts to help them to access safe supplies of drugs, and they're overseeing these respite centers that are popping up, such as Atira and the women and the Downtown Eastside Women's Center and Wish that have created a tent for women, and women from the street are helping to oversee that. The $200,000 of funds coming from the Honorable Melanie Mark's ministry is going to tap into the existing work that's already underway. It's going to build upon it. It's going to extend it. And it's also going to study the impacts. The peer demonstration project, as I'm calling it, is going to employ some 40 peers in the Downtown Eastside over a 6-month period, utilizing 8,500 of peer work hours. And the research that's going to happen, we're going to study the impact of peer work on people's lives and their livelihoods to better understand the challenges and the best practices of this new and emerging model for helping people who face multiple barriers to begin to attach to the workforce. Through this peer initiative, people will gain skills and paid experience, and members will gather information along the way to further inform future programming and its ability to respond to the labor market participation needs of people in the Downtown Eastside, which is different. They don't fit your regular mainstream employment model. So I think this is a very innovative approach and can be shared with other jurisdictions as well, the results of it. And there's another very important component of this peer work initiative that I'd like to mention. Work is itself considered to be a key determinant of health. It really changes people. Work is more than a job. It provides needed income, but it also builds self-esteem, a sense of purpose, identity. It gives a sense of hope for a better future, and it gives people a way to participate in the economy and to give back to their communities where before maybe they were just on the receiving ends. And all of this is are basic needs. They're intangible, but they're still basic needs and they're of our social health. So by focusing on the transformative power of work, we begin to see people's lives change. And so this demonstration project will study not just the hard skills and the income, but also the improvements in people's lives and their sense of well-being as a result of this work. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I ask Minister Mark to come up to the podium for questions? Thank you. A few gentle reminders to the media. Please press *1 if you have a question. Media is limited to one question. We will be able to take follow-ups, time permitting. And please do keep your handsets unmuted. You will not be audible till I call your names. Are there any questions at this time? Hearing none, thank you all for joining us.